Mahalo and welcome back to Maebashi, which is episode 10. And I have emotionally recovered enough that I can review this episode because my waterworks were going hard this episode. It was very difficult to keep myself together, but we're gonna get through it together. Starting with this Ketto image of him pulling the absolute cinema reaction. Now I'm going to give another shout out to Trace slash Crown on a Blue Sky. She supplied me with some more information about Kerope that was in the art book prior to this episode coming out, trying to give us a little bit of a better idea of who he is. And he really is kind of coming off as like a chaotic neutral to a degree, where he's somebody who is inherently selfish, according to the book, or at least according to the voice actor who voices him in the book. His job really is just to keep the witch engine running as best he can, and just using whatever means he can have. He doesn't seem to be particularly super, like, he's not supposed to care a lot about the girls that he works with, which he does end up clarifying that in the episode. But for the most part, the book kind of refers to him as like an antagonist, and to be specifically very ruthless. I do think the line that goes hardest in the art book is specifically the one that says that Kerohe probably doesn't care about the future of the witches. He probably doesn't care. Oh my god. Like, it's interesting because, like, his function in this series is very similar to, like, Kyubey and Madoka Magica, except for, like, there aren't as big negative consequences for, it's not as a parasitic relationship with the girls as bad as it is in Madoka. Obviously, the stakes in Madoka are significantly higher, and it's a lot more life and death. Here, he obviously kind of screws over the group of girls, but, like, it's not coming at the cost of their lives and everything. So it's like he's a villain, but, like, at the same time, he's not, like, a super villain. And he is, to a degree, fair, where he's like, you guys have the time. I'm supplying you the time to get the shop back and get back on your feet and solve everything the way you need to. So it's not completely like, oh, Eiko stole the shop, you guys are screwed. Da 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 da. Boo. He gives them as much he can a chance. I don't think there's anything yet that fully explains him, like, absorbing the Mappo and then, like, going back to being skinny or any of that. That's not quite explained, and I assume they'll just keep... I feel like they're going to try, at the very least, to keep some kind of surprise with him by the end of it. It's kind of a bummer to see him be more antagonistic than I would like him to be. I kind of like the more, depending on how they're handled. Depending on the series, I gotta make that stipulation there. Depending on how they're handled in the series, I do like it when these characters act to an antagonistic degree, but it's for the betterment of the future of the characters. But we'll talk more about him later. We do, again, have the situation where they have the time limit at which they need to get the shop back. And they're, as we saw from the last episode, should they fail to get the shop back, all of their memories of everything that has transpired is going to be erased. Which, my biggest question is, what are the consequences of that? Well, I'm not going to find out because that's a next episode problem, so I'm going to put my thinking cap away for now. In the meantime, the girls do see and already start to figure out what's going on with Azu as she tries to hide and she transforms back to her regular form. And they're all trying to deal with the situation, which I think this is just a great episode overall. Like, it's not quite a recap episode. I do have to put that out there, and I'm glad it's not, because some of these series, especially if production sucks, they'll have a random recap episode towards the end of the series where it's like, I think the plot should move forward and we shouldn't have a recap episode. But this episode does a good job as functioning as a pseudo recap episode where the girls really sit there and reflect on how far they've come. And we get to see this right off the bat, because Kyoka who is like, we gotta calm down and we gotta think about this rationally. We need to not panic. We need to keep our heads together and figure out how we're going to solve the problem. Now, we've moved back to Eiko, who's, as they did before, as I kind of thought they would, the way they did Mai. She's more grounded. She is not in league with Kerope or doing things. She is still acting completely independent, and the backstory we have for her still stands firm. But we begin to get a little bit more of an idea what's up with her. And we do have the red roses now, which, you know, maybe, like, her having this symbolism of the red roses and her messing around with red rose petals here fits her as, I guess, a character, since all of them have different flowers. Somebody who's incredibly passionate, as we have seen. She has very strong passions to wanting to be a doctor. as well as passionate enough to steal everything away from them, but also a flower that has thorns. She certainly has proven to have her thorns, but we see her mellow out now, and she just happens to be a girl who has very strong magical potential, but she is not as, like, blatantly evil as before. And that she clearly still has the goal of desperately wanting to be a doctor, but feeling like she's constantly impacted by her parents trying to thwart her. And she does ask the questions, and Ketto is like, wow, you're very direct. She's like, what do you get out of this? Why are you doing all this? Which was something we didn't really bother to ask before. But Ketto, in the most roundabout way, gives an explanation that is very similar to Kyubey, where he's like, I don't know, it's kind of like the fun of having, like, a garden or having, like, an ant farm, where I can see you guys run around and try your best, and I can see if I can cultivate you guys into success or not. It doesn't matter. And it's, like, very similar to, it's like raising cattle, but, like, a little less malicious than that. But that, I mean, again, we're getting about as much information as we will for now with Ketto. I think if they're going to have any major plot twists with Ketto, they're going to save that for the last second, because that's what they always do with these fairies. All our little fairy mascot characters, they always save it for the last second. I could name 1,000 different series where that happens, but I'm not going to. So he's once again put on the back burner. But I do give it to Eiko being smart enough to be like, bro, I don't trust you. Bro, you are annoying. Fair enough for her having trepidation. That's probably for the smarter sake. I do think it's interesting, though, the way that he phrases the other characters and the issues that they've had is that they let themselves be susceptible to greed. Which is technically true with the girls. There have been often times when the Mappa was used selfishly in the series, it was to their own ends. And I do think this could bring up the very interesting conversation of, like, greed is not always evil, but obviously when it's gone too far in different situations, it can be. But you have, like, Choco, who was very greedy in the sense that she used her own personal magic to constantly reverse time for the sake of her family, and ended up being a burden to the other girls, but she never stole the Mappo. So you could have an interesting conversation about greed, but obviously him saying it so bluntly, it's kind of the charm of this series where characters can be very harsh and blunt, but, like, they're not wrong. But once again, the series does remind us that Eiko's problems are not, like, there's no plot twist where everything about her backstory was fake. It's true. But we do learn one very important nugget of information, which is that, like, in her desire to be a doctor, we've realized that she's not actually getting good grades, which is another thing that's preventing her from pursuing this path. And we see, of course, her parents, specifically in the scene, her mother, are incredibly not supportive. And I'm starting to wonder if her antagonism towards the girls on this second time around is coming from a place of where, like, I got this vibe when she came back last episode and was like, I still have my wish that I want granted, that while I think initially her having the encouragement and them giving her sort of the power to make the decision to try to pursue the dream that she wanted was what was necessary then, but them just singing a song and trying to cheer her on round 2, despite being more powerful, is not what she needed. I think she genuinely is at a point where she's like, I need help. I need help to make it to the next level, to get to the next place. But also, we don't know enough about her characters in the sense is, like, is she studying really hard and failing, or is she not studying at all and failing? Like, I think there's still a lot of questions and a lot of things we don't know about her character to fully understand what's going on with her personal situation and what she would need to still try to pursue the dream that she wants. But I do think, from what they've seen and the fact that they bothered to give us these scenes where we're revisiting her character, I don't think she's going to remain a villain. I think I'm still going to sit on the whole bit where she's just the final boss of friendship. But we'll talk about that a little bit later. In the meantime, back with our main gang, Yuna immediately is like, this is a good opportunity for us to have a sleepover, and everybody should take a bath and, like, you know, let's reset, relax, and get our heads on, which everybody initially is like, girl, is that really what we should be doing right now? But also, it's like the middle of the night. What are you guys gonna do right now? You really do need to refresh, even if the time is ticking. And then we get to phase 1 of me bawling my eyes out. Like, whew. We get introduced to Yuna's mom, which is one thing is that they've really held off on showing moms for some reason in the series, because I was like, are we even gonna see Yuna's mom? But we do. And oh my god, her mom is so cute. She's like, oh my god, you have friends over? The place is a mess. Oh my god. Hi everybody, it's so good to see you. I'm so happy you're here. Oh my god, friends are so cool. And the mom is so quirky and fun. We can obviously see where Yuna gets it. And I think the mom was a good ad. And also the piece to reveal that all of my theories about Yuna were correct. I also, like, Yuna's backstory is just, it's been right in front of us. Like, I don't think this has been some kind of, like, I did not crack some big code here. We've been given the hints so far with Yuna. I think it's also just an added piece of depression to me that, like, she has all of these t-shirts that have, like, words of affirmation because girl low-key has depression. Like, girl is low-key, like, got a pretty sad TM backstory behind that smile of hers, where her mom reveals that, like, Yuna's best friend has always been her grandfather, and her grandfather, as we know at the top of the series, had passed away recently. So Yuna has essentially been friendless this entire time, and her mom's very excited to see her now making friends. Side note, I like that everybody gets a cool, funky little hairstyle. I never really thought about how insanely long Choco's hair is, because it's always in braids. She got long hair. She got that long blonde hair, girl. Like, it just goes on for days. I love it when characters change hairs. I love it when we get unique hairstyles. It sparks joy. Anyways, back to depression. We just, like, have this bit where all the girls are kind of somewhat shocked that Yuna has not had a lot of friends in her time. And it's mad depressing. And I like that they're kind of surprised, because despite all of them having, like, their own sort of hesitation with Yuna in the series, and, like, where we've had her be called dumb, or where they've been like, you're just too optimistic or you're too forgiving, etc., etc., they still, like her and feel like that while they may not appreciate her optimism, they thought surely another person would have loved Yuna if it were not I. But that has not been the case, which makes my heart hurt a little bit. Oh, other side note. I was looking at the Japanese reaction Twitters when I saw the episode because I was like, somebody needs to share opinions with me. All of them were complaining about the croquettes in the bowl because apparently it's boiled croquettes, and, like, all of Japanese Twitter was like, what in the heck is that? All of them are like, what in the deep fried hamburger is happening here? I guess that's a big thing. They're all like, that's weird food. That is what Japanese Twitter cared about. No one cared about the lore or my deep feelings. It was just how weird the food was. Anyways, Yuna picks up where her mom left off, trying to explain her sad TM backstory, where I like how self-aware she is, but it makes me 1,000 times more depressed. And, like, I feel like anybody who's neurodivergent or just, like, socially inept could very much relate to Yuna in this moment, where she talks about how she's like, I try to be optimistic, I try to be fun and positive and stuff, but I also am aware to a degree that I'm a lot. I don't necessarily know where my limits are with people. I don't know when I've gone too far, but it oftentimes has scared people away, or I've annoyed people to death, and they just leave me behind. And especially at something where she, like, pulls out why summer break was so important last episode. She's like, I always get left behind and no one cares about me during summer break, and that's why meeting you guys has meant a lot. And also, again, why I was like, she is going to suffer probably the most, or at least she's going to be one of these guys who suffers the most from having the group dissolve and get amnesia'd. And I think what's so sweet about all of this, too, is how much Yuna and Azu end up pairing up in all of this. Because we've known, like, these two have been pitted against each other from the top of the series. But they are actually, in the friendship department, incredibly similar at the end of the day. We get the revelation that, like, Yuna's like, I'm glad that Azu told me pretty bluntly that I was too much when we first met, because I need to know, like, as a way to, like, kind of tell me my limits. And I get that people have this reaction to me the way that Azu did. And Azu, obviously, in this moment is, like, paired up between, like, regret for what she did, but also, like, at the same time being like, Yuna, you deserve more friends and you deserve better, which she does. And I like that we're having this kind of full circle roundabout, which is, I kind of expected this to happen this series. I'd be more surprised if they didn't do this. But I think the way that they've handled it is very sweet, and it's very worth the payoff. I think it's very much worth it that we didn't resolve Yuna and Azu at the start, because everything that happens with those two in this episode is way more impactful, that we've had this build over the course of the series. I also like that Yuna, like, takes the time to be like, when we find Eiko, what we're going to do, or more specifically what Yuna wants to do, is apologize. Yuna doesn't know what she's apologizing for, but she feels like she must have wronged Eiko in some way because that's historically how she's felt about all the friendships, where she's like, I've gone too far, I've done something I wasn't supposed to, I stepped over a line, and I should apologize for it, so that at the very least, like, I'm trying to do my due diligence with these people. Which, I get what she means, because again, if I had to guess what Yuna did wrong or what the group did wrong in general, is that it's not necessarily what they did wrong, but they didn't supply the help that Eiko expected, but Eiko also didn't really communicate properly what she needed to get there. And I feel like that bridge between, like, the girls acting without fully understanding what wish they're granting, and the person who wants the wish granted not communicating properly what they want, I think that's going to be a bridge and a good point of resolution for the series. And we'll see how dramatic that is handled. And then Azu finally gets enough motivation after hearing Yuna's sob story to get out from under the covers, but also she creates this huge itinerary of things that the girls need to do together and to, like, really embrace the friendship that they all have and make the most of the time they have left and all these things that they're expecting to do. And it's just really heartwarming seeing all of them come together and be like, oh, let's do that and that, and just all the stuff that's absolutely not going to happen anytime soon. But it's nice to see Azu have, like, this motivation. Like, she does it all the time in the series, where, like, she's a little tsundere, but then immediately she's like, somebody's hurt, and I'm immediately going to take action. She immediately is trying to solve the problem in the only way she can think of to do so, and it's so sweet. She's also like, by the way, I look this way and you have not said anything. So, like, get it out of your system. Like, get it out. And Yuna's like, I didn't really notice anything different. It's just you. And she's like, oh, are you just pitying me? Are you just, like, doing that thing where you obviously see that I'm different, but you're just trying to be nice? And Yuna's like, no, you're just Azu. Like, genuinely, as long as you look the way that makes you happy, it doesn't matter. Which drives Azu insane. And it's cute. I also like that the other characters, once again, as they should, like, have a moment where Yuna's like, oh, I kind of get now why you were mean in episode 2, at the end of episode 2 and into 3. And the rest of them, once again, as they properly should from their character development, are like, that's not a good excuse to be mean to people just because you're also suffering something similar to them. But then you have Mai, who went through the character development there, who's like, but it's always important to forgive people who do regret their actions and genuinely want to do better. And I think that's just so sweet to have all these callbacks. Again, this is where it's like doing a bit of what a recap episode does without being an actual recap episode, which I would like to see this more than a recap episode. Also, I immediately was like, oh, girl's got a whole dark room in her house, but then it is explained in the series, which I'm happy. Her grandfather obviously had an obsession with cameras, and we knew he had a lot of cameras. He also had he had a photography business, so they had a dark room built into their house on top of being a manju store. So, like, they explain this enough that it's not completely jarring that Yuna has a whole dark room. It also took me a minute to realize, too, as somebody who grew up with disposable, like, Kodak cameras back in the day, when you finished those, we would just mail them to Kodak, and then they would send us the final printed photos. And then later in my life, I took black and white photography, and I've been in a darkroom, and I know the whole process to a darkroom. But I've never done it with color film before. And I was like, oh, the process to do color film is probably the exact same, or very similar, to the process for black and white photography. It just has color. The processing and the chemicals and having to make sure that the film that took the photos is never exposed to light or else it would ruin them. It makes sense that, like, that whole process still has to adhere to the same rules as a regular darkroom. And it just took me watching this episode to realize that, hey, that's how that works. That's how that whole thing goes. Huh. But yeah, I'm like, oh, I guess when Yuna has all these disposable cameras, she has been processing them herself, which I just want to put out there for anybody who's never done any kind of, like, traditional photography, like, rendering and stuff. It sucks. This process sucks. There's so many steps where you can mess it up, and you have to use a lot of chemicals, and you have to be very careful and very safe with the chemicals. Like, the whole process for this is incredibly tedious compared to, like, modern day. You just take a photo with your phone and you can print it out on a printer. So, like, for Yuna constantly being touted as this kind of dumb and incompetent character throughout the series, I will say what she's doing right now is a pain to do, and there are so many steps you can mess up. So she's actually got some skills in there. She's been hiding these skills. And then more learning about the different sides of Yuna. The next day, they're setting out to try to find the shop, and the only method that they can think of to get back to the shop is try to find a shutter back in town, in hope that they have a big enough wish that allows them to re-enter the shop. In this section, though, when Yuna is walking around, we kind of go back to the fact that the only people that she's really befriended in the area are a bunch of old people. But I do like that, like, again, having nods and having creative nods to other stuff that has happened thus far in the show. She, like, very disrespectfully refers to the old people that have come around because her grandfather, which is a kind of a callback to Choco being very rude to the old lady in the other episode. So I again, they're just putting all these Easter eggs in a very creative and not super straightforward, thankfully, way. So again, it feels like we're recapping everything that we've seen thus far, but without having to be like, do you remember that one time that Choco was rude? I like how, like, not direct it is. We also have just kind of a fun little back and forth with the group about just how different the girls are, but how well they get along. Because you have here, first of all, we have Azu, who doesn't want to, like, showcase her appearance in public, so she's, like, covered up. But then we go on a rant about, like, Azu's like, I'm so jealous of Kyoko because she's all natural and just puts on some sunscreen and that's it. And then we get to, like, Azu being like, and then you have Yuna, who does her makeup so messy. And then Yuna's like, no, I want to have better makeup skills. We should do, like, a makeup group class together. And then they're like, well, why don't we get Kumai to do it? Because she's known for being fashionable and doing all these different... And just there's so many callbacks here. And we just see how much the group's grown. But, like, it still keeps the fact that the group is different. I like that each character is very unique from the last. Maybe not always visually here, because it's an anime. Emotionally, everybody's very diverse, and I really like that. And then we get our little train scene from the preview, where they're all heading back into town in order to deal with the situation. And this is just, again, more of that kind of recapping as well as, like, state of the group discussion goes forth in here. Where Yuna's like, why don't we just talk about how far we've come? And I think you had to do that for my story, because it's not really easy for her to just, in a clever way, talk about how much she's stopped paying attention to Yua and how much she has now moved on to the group. So I think her just stating that, like, Yua contacted me and figured out who I was and has had this bit of reconnection. But this time, instead of being super obsessed and immediately responding, I've let it be, and it doesn't bother me as much. And I think it's really cute, too, because Yuna is like, oh, is it because we occupy your mind more than Yua did? And I'm like, oh. And she's like, instead of, like, sassing back at them, Maya's like, yeah, you guys are my new number one. And it's very sweet. And it's nice to see the whole group evolve. I also am glad that we didn't just go through everybody. This was just the easiest way to, like, refresh on where Maya was emotionally as we kind of go through, like, each character in this episode. So we move on to our next one, which is Choco talks about how meeting everybody has gotten her to open up about her issues, especially in her own personal community, where she's talked to other kids and families that are going through similar stress to her, and building up this community and working together and really taking the burden off herself, which I think is incredibly sweet. It's again, it's well-written growth, and it's also both relatable to people, but not the most overused story that I've seen in media. And then we have a shot of the food, where they obviously brought some food back from Yuna's mom, but they've also gone shopping while they're together. And I think it's nice to see the group bonding, and it just feels very natural. I feel like a lot of series struggle with having group synergy, and sometimes it feels very forced. But I think in this series, they've done such a phenomenal job at ensuring that all of the characters talk to each other and have some kind of dynamic amongst themselves, and then a good dynamic as a group as a whole. And then Yuna comes out with these letters that she has made for everybody, when the letters are in actuality the pictures that she rendered in the darkroom. And we cut to it being night as the girls are walking around town, various places in Maebashi, trying to find the shutter. And now Yuna has found, allegedly, a shutter. And then we get the next emotional stab in the heart as Yuna comes to realize that it's just an open shutter and it's somebody's workshop and not the Witchverse. And I also have to mention here, because I can never showcase it in these reviews, the music is done so well here. They play such an emotional song over this whole sequence. The voice actors all give phenomenal performances that work so well with the music, which I think is one of the trickier things to do, where you have really good music, but then also have the voice actors be able to talk over the music in such a way that it doesn't sound like somebody's interrupting a song or the song isn't interrupting the show. It's so well put together. It's incredibly well edited. Very emotional sequence. I think the lighting again in this series has been phenomenal. It really enhances the scene, because seeing Yuna in the darkness and then highlighted by the shutter, but it's coming off like behind her and everything, and the blue toning to just kind of drive home that this is a sad scene. So good. And we see each of the girls kind of go through this emotional path of like, we don't blame you, Yuna, for like, you know, having a false alarm. We all want this. We all want to stay together. And I just love that they all do. They all actually genuinely like each other. And they all acknowledge that each of them has played a significant role in the way that they've changed and the way that they've changed for the better. Like, if anybody's wishes have truly been granted from the witches, it would be each other's wish. Like, Kyoka talks about how it's been great having a group that's reaffirmed her. I feel like Kyoko, unfortunately, has gotten the least amount of, like, love specifically from the group that we get to see on screen, but she's had one of the more rich backstories for her, which, again, is why I feel like it might get retouched in these last two episodes. I actually cut out a part from last episode where I went on a rant about, like, how, like, Mole Man could still show up, especially, like, next episode, while they're all separated. He could try to stalk her, and then it's a good excuse for somebody to come in, swoop in, and save her. Or, like, just have a reason for them to reconnect. Because she will be dealing with that on her own next episode. I was gonna say, I said a lot last episode, but I just cut it out because I was like, I don't know if me doomsdaying Kyoko's character might be a little too much. But now I'm gonna kind of firmly say that, yeah, I would not be surprised if the tail end of Kyoko's plot shows up next episode, and then we final boss it, the episode 12. And we have this scene with Azu being like, I don't want to give up. Like, her being the most honest we've seen her thus far, where she's like, I love you guys, and I don't want to lose this, and I don't want to give up. I don't want to be the last person hanging on to this. And oh god, this scene, I'm gonna cry now. Like, going through each of them, where Choco is like, you guys have made my life for the better. My family and my, like, situation and burdens have all gotten better knowing you guys, and I never want to forget that. Mai talking about how she's been able to move away from just being obsessed with UNA and caring more about herself, while also bringing back her episode title, where she's like, I'm not just gonna shoot for 70%, I want 100%. I want to be with you guys, which, girl, I'm crying. I'm crying right now. Oh my god. And Azu being like, I don't know how I can be a better person. I don't know how I can improve my life at all. I just want to be with you guys. And I was like, that's so real, though. That's so real. Like, and that's the problem with them losing their memories of everything that has transpired. Does that mean we also lose all their character development? Are they all gonna revert back to the people they were prior to meeting each other? Or do they just, like, keep the character development but have no memories of why they became that way? In the same way that, technically speaking, UNA had her memories erased magically, but she still has a remnant of that experience and obviously is trying to be nicer to Mai, despite not fully knowing why she's behaving that way and improving as a person. I don't know. I would like to think that, like, there's going to be a degree of them resetting, but at the end of the day, we only have one episode where we can rightfully get everybody's memories back, because I don't think they're going to drag this out to episode 12, thankfully. Because, as I said in another review today, I don't like amnesia plotlines, or I don't like it when they overstay their welcome. Thank God this series only has 2 more episodes, because if they lost their memories forever, I'd be pissed. But I do wonder how much of their characters are going to get reset. But I think those nuggets are going to be there, and they're going to magically remember each other, compromising the forget magic that's put on them magically. And then there's Yuna, who's all like, no, we're not giving up. Even if I forget, I'll never forget. And I like that, because, like, there's a part of her, because she's our Genki dingus protagonist, but honestly, she's been my favorite Genki protagonist we've ever had. Like, I feel like they never stated, obviously, Japan never does, but, like, she is our little neurodivergent baby in my mind. And I feel like the way they've handled her has been way better than they've handled any other kind of character that I've ever seen in this category. Where it's like, yeah, Yuina, you be so Yuina that you forgot, and just remember everything, because that would be something you would do. And it's so sweet, and just seeing her like have this range of emotion, like I really loved Yuina. She has renewed a love I have for like kind of our silly Billy Genki protagonists. I've loved the way her character's been handled. And then we also have Kyoko, who has had this whole inspiration this entire time to be a mayor, from what everybody else has said. Like, she's had these huge changes. Like, I think it's going to be very detrimental that she loses these memories, because there has been a myriad of personal things that have changed in her life since joining the witches and since using like the Mabo and everything. So I am very scared to see her have to get re-traumatized if it goes down that. I just want to see her be the mayor and change the world and everything be happy, and she can dress masculine if she wants to and leave everyone else behind. I just want to see her. Oh, I'm so worried for her. And then we have this worst ever moment where they all stop and you're like, it's gone. Their memories are gone. And they all very, very slowly stand up and look at each other. And you're like, oh, it's gone. And they immediately just turn around and they're like, oh, and just go on their way. And I'm like, that was so rude. That was really rude, actually. I didn't like that. I knew it was gonna happen and it still hurt. I was like, I knew this was gonna happen. And you know what? I've got to give it to the people who worked on this show. Because they made so much effort and making sure that the knife they just stabbed into my heart was twisted as tightly as possible. Because not only do we have this, not only do we have, like, the music be very dramatic and climax right here, we have this shot, which I believe, I can't remember if it's the album shot, but we've seen these shots before. They hinted that this was going to happen the whole time, and I hate it. And we see Yuna have this tear where it's like the last remnant of her memory of what went on is still there, but then her hair blows in the wind and the tear disappears, and that was rude. That was mean. And then the picture's really rude. I'm really mad about the picture. And then that means that all of them have a picture, because the picture she probably gave everybody was this picture, and they all just see themselves by themselves at the fireworks show that they had seen. But maybe in the next episode they'll all have the photographs together and they'll piece it together and they'll remember each other somehow. And I'm just feelings. I have feelings and they hurt. And then, oh my god, as if the staff were not cruel enough, if they were not mean enough to us already, they take everyone out of the ending. Do you know how obnoxious it must be to re-render all of this footage minus everything? They take out the girls. They even have the audacity to take out the scene with the phones at the end. Oh, it was so mean. It was so mean, and my feelings hurt. I'm really upset about it, actually. They did everything in their power. They used their budget to make sure that the people who watched this show cried really, really hard. And when I get you, Bandai Namco, when I get you. Oh my god. Anyways, bringing myself back. To wrap up this review, we are moving into 2 more episodes. I think I've talked on all the theories that I wanted to talk to you about, but I did want to bring up one more thing. I can't remember if I did in episode 2 or 3. I mentioned the titles of my videos have a trend, minus the first episode. The first episode has nothing to do with the rest of them, but all the titles I've used in the videos all are related to each other. They have something, maybe some IP that bridges them all together somehow. And it's not easy. I'm guessing it will not be easy, but if you do figure it out, if the first person who is able to comment between now and the end of the series, if somebody does, I'm going to sweeten the pot right here. I'm going to give out a prize. I will be giving out Maebashi merch to the winner if you can figure out the connections between all the titles. So I wish you best of luck, and I won't give any hints. I will say the last title, which I hope, I'm just kind of gambling on the last title fitting the last episode, I think will give it away. But if you can figure it out before the last episode, that'll be even more impressive. So until you've figured it out, I will see you next time. Bye-bye!